Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Creative Niche. Today, we have Thad Lichtensteiger here with us, Van Wert County Commissioner. I've known Thad for a number of years now, but he's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on in Van Wert County, some changes, and also just any updates that we should have. And so welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. Yeah, it was nice. We probably spent the last, better than an hour walking around, looking at things you do, the new things that you do. And I've been here before, but it's probably been 10 years, maybe, something like that. Man. So there's a lot of new things that you guys are doing that are very impressive, very cutting edge.
It has been 10 years since you've been here then.
Yeah.
You think so? Wow.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, the story of Window Creations clear back to the village of Scott. I know some of that history as well, Bureaus of Scott.
Yeah.
And, that's back to your dad's and probably grandpa's history as well.
Yeah, we grew a little bit since then.
Yeah. Well, and that's back when you were, and I heard you mention it, that you were in the village of Scott.
Yep.
Which is a border town. We share Scott with Paulding County.
Correct.
And you're a long ways from where Scott is. It's interesting that you're here, but that's a story all by itself.
Yeah.
I'm here as county commissioner, which is good. And one of the, I shouldn't say a specialty, but, as the county commissioners, there are three of us, and there's 88 counties in the state of Ohio. 86 of those counties have a board of 3 county commissioners, okay? So this is pretty standard fare, what we have. Almost everyone else in Northwest Ohio has this. I think there's 2 notable exceptions. One is Summit County, and one is Cuyahoga County. Cuyahoga is obviously Cleveland.
So they have probably more commissioners.
They have
at that
a
point.
board of county commissioners, and that could be 6 or 8 or 10. I'm not even sure what the number is, but it was changed because of bribery and graft and corruption. I mean, one of some pretty nasty stuff that made them change how they do business. But for the rest of us, 86 counties, this is how we function. 3 county commissioners. We divide up the responsibilities, and so we sit on different committees, attend different functions, and fulfill the obligations of the county by sharing those things. And economic development is probably more of what I do. I sit on the VWADC board, which kind of sounds like a funky, Croatian name or something like that. But VWADC is the Van Wert Area Economic Development Corporation.
Correct.
And so. We're.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit, dive a little deeper into, as far as that. I mean, you guys have revitalized the downtown. I assume you've been part of that.
Well, yeah, but that's not a county thing. That's the Van Wert County Foundation.
Okay.
And that requires some deep pockets that the county doesn't have. And I'm lucky to be a trustee on the Van Wert County Foundation as well. And it's great to see that. As a matter of fact, there's lots of other communities that are sitting in that same socioeconomic kind of condition, but just don't have the finances to revitalize. Unless you've got a rich uncle like the Van Wert County Foundation that has about $115 or $120 million of endowed resources, you just don't, you don't have the means to be able to do that.
And so when they do that investment, do they, at that point, they own the property and then they lease out the property to prospective, individuals that would want to start up a business,
right?
Correct.
And people that want to live, people that want to be residents and live on the 2nd and 3rd floors. Right. Well, that is one of those stipulations that the Van Wert County Foundation holds the title, because if you don't and you let someone obtain ownership, you run the risk that this whole thing is going to happen all over again in 20 years.
Right.
That's part of the. Let me say that the downside to capitalism is that, okay, someone owns property and they can keep it up or not keep it up as they see fit in their own eyes. And so a lot of those things, people just didn't see the justification to keep those buildings up and keep them in good condition. And so the downtown crumbled. If you look at the old Home Guard building, which is the corner of Market and Main Street, that was one of the most beautiful opulent buildings. It started out as insurance. It was Home Guard Insurance. Went through a number of different owners and iterations since then, but was ignored for the last 60 years, maybe 40 years. The folks that made FFA jackets were there. I should remember Van Wert something. That name escapes me. It'll pop just as soon as this broadcast is over. maybe it was Van Wert Apparel, made FFA jackets for the entire nation in Van Wert, Ohio.
The entire nation?
Yes.
So it wasn't a local, I mean, it was a local business, but it wasn't necessarily local, just Ohio even. It was
the entire nation.
Wow.
All of FFA, the blue corduroy jackets that were just still are a very sharp looking jacket. Those were all made in Van Wert. And they moved out of there, and the building fell in disrepair and eventually just tumbled into the streets, and had to be taken down. And I remember what it did. Stacey Adams was our economic development director at the time, and it cost, I'm going to say, $288,000 to tear that building down, to get it out, and then to kind of greenscape that that real estate right there. In other words, make it flat, get everything buried or hauled away, get dirt on top of it, and get a lawn of grass on top.
So this has been a fairly new thing that I've seen, because we work in a lot of different towns across, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, in different areas. But at least a lot of towns in Ohio, I've seen a lot of downtowns start to become, the hubs for revitalization.
Yep, absolutely.
And, like Bell Fountain, I know they're one of them that's fairly local that started to do a lot of revitalization. So that's all private funded. It wasn't government funded at all. It didn't come from the state. It came from...
There may be some grant money involved there, but Jason Duff, who was kind of the epicenter of that, Jason is literally bought some of those downtown Bell Fountain buildings for $1.
Oh, really?
Because they were in almost that much of a liability. I think his grandparents are the quarry that's like 15 miles north. I want to say Duff Quarries, but I could be wrong. But I mean, that's probably a place where some means came from to be able to revitalize, because you don't revitalize these buildings without some capital. It just doesn't happen otherwise.
Yeah.
But, Van Wert cheap. Dad always used to say, bought right is half sold. So if you start out with $1 investment, that makes it easier and a lot easier to rationalize that investment. But a lot of work undoing the things that should have been done and weren't over the last 50 or 100 years.
Yeah. Most of the money's made on real estate, from what I've heard from different people, is, it's made on the buy, not on the sell. You have to buy it right, or else it doesn't matter what it sells for, right?
Exactly right.
I mean, yes, you're probably going to have some of that appreciation in there if you buy it and you hold, but, it has to be bought right, or it doesn't work.
One of the things we'd love to do, and it was going to literally be the centerpiece of the whole downtown development, was the Marsh Hotel. And the Marsh Hotel, when all of America went through Van Wert, Ohio, the Lincoln Highway was the first highway that went from coast to coast. Okay, the very first one. And so everyone knew Balliet's Coffee Shop because all of America went through Van Wert, and they saw that, and they stopped there. They ate at Balliet's, and they stayed at the Marsh Hotel. If you've been in the Marsh Hotel, I've been in there in the last 6 months, and you kind of have the keys to it, or can get the keys because the foundation owns it. I mean, those little apartments or those rooms are more like a dorm-sized room. I mean, they're just very small.
Very small, yeah.
So if you're going to develop that into something more of a current hotel, you're probably going to take out every other wall, or maybe 2 out of 3. So, I mean, tremendous investment just in gutting that, getting the old out, making sure you don't suffer structurally from taking those walls and partitions out. And
just on a side note, before I forget, it just popped into my brain. Have you heard? Is it Walls Drugstore?
Yes, been to Walls Drug. Yes, Wall Drug.
Is that out in the Dakotas?
Yes.
Is that where that is? Mm-hmm. Now, that's not along Lincoln Highway, is it?
No.
Okay.
That's,
because that was kind of the, he had to entice travelers to come in by offering really cheap coffee and really cheap, other things. And then he built that up, and
it's a neat, eclectic place if you've never been there. See, my buddy Brent Stevens and I, Brent's our economic development director, we have gone up to the Indian tribes on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. We've taken coats up there. We've taken food up there.
You've done voluntary work up there.
Yeah, for 10 years. And it kind of fell off of our priority list for a number of different reasons. But it was neat to engage in the people up there and meet Native Americans. I mean, we would say Indians. I don't consider that offensive term. Some do. But it just, the names were so compelling, whitetail and running deer and black elk and just they were the original inhabitants, or some of them. Right. And so to go up there and be able to help out was kind of a cool thing. But one of our stopping points was always Wall Drug, and you knew you were close when we got to
You
Wall
get
Drug.
all the signs.
Yeah.
You get
Yes,
a million
really,
signs on the
really.
way. We went there. My family went there on a trip out west, and that was kind of on our way back. Is we hit the Dakotas, Badlands, and then we was pretty much on the exit coming back to Ohio.
Sure.
But we went out to Colorado, Estes Park, and then Grand Tetons and Yellowstone, and just
Right.
kind of made that big loop. Which is phenomenal. I mean, everybody.
I want to say
everybody
that's
sees that.
Interstate 90. Is that what that is that goes up through there?
You know,
Does
I
that
think
sound
we was.
right?
I think we was on 90. I can't remember. We was on so many different highways, but it was just a phenomenal
Yeah.
trip. Any trip out west, just really neat. But I remembered Wall Drugs, and so when you was talking about Balliets, I wondered if Walls was similar or if the draw was all the signs to get people to get off that route.
It's an interesting side note because when you're out there driving on 90, I mean, you go miles and miles and miles without even an exit.
Yeah.
And so
Be
you're
gassed
looking,
up.
You're looking for the next McDonald's, all right? And there's no McDonald's for 100 miles. And you stumble onto Wall Drug, and of course, here's all these old wooden Indians and knick-knack things and Western wear. And it's really kind of a compilation of lots of different little stores, retail stores inside there.
We was close to Sturgis, so
Oh, yeah.
and so
That's
like
a whole nother
oh my
discussion when
goodness,
we talk about Sturgis.
Yeah, but we didn't go, but
Yeah.
we was there when all the bikers were there, and so there was bikers
Sure.
running up and down the roads, which was kind of neat for the kids to see, like these just really big packs.
Another Brent Stevens story. He made a lot of his living, a lot of his lifetime was selling RVs. And so they would always have a big show, take a lot of their units to Sturgis.
Okay.
And market it to, to bikers or travelers or whoever. And it was just an amazing grouping of people that just showed up and made it a big event.
It was a big event.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I also remember Wall Drug. I mean, I've seen pictures in there of, if you're a conservative, of Kristi Noem, who was governor of South Dakota, visiting Wall Drug. That's,
Well,
that's
she
her
was.
real
Now,
estate.
now she's in charge of Homeland
Security.
Homeland
Yes.
Security.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it's a lot of neat. The Black Hills out there, which is where the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is. It's not far from the Badlands. I mean, you could get into that discussion. It's a little bit embarrassing for the United States to put those people, the indigenous people out there on real estate that really has no inherent value.
Right.
I mean, if you talk about the Badlands, you're talking about a place you can't even grow grass.
Right.
And then to add insult to injury, you only had to drive probably 20 or 30 miles, and you had I think the Minuteman missile silos. So if you remember the Cold War, that's a little before your time, but not mine. If we would ever have started lobbing nuclear weapons at each other, that would have been ground zero for the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation.
Okay.
And they weren't really, the United States government wasn't embarrassed about putting it there. Of course, you're also talking about real estate that had no value. So maybe it was the right place for it, a logical place for it.
Sure.
But there's some inherent beauty in the Black Hills too.
Yeah. I don't know that I've been to the Black Hills, but probably should check it out.
It's if you go to the little town of Custer, and then very close to that is the monument of who's the famous Indian that's right there?
Oh, you're talking
Not
about
Little
Crazy
Turtle.
Horse?
Crazy Horse
Yeah,
is right there. And Brent knows a guy that Tom. I can't think of Tom's last name, but
That was
gets
all
this-
privately. That's privately
Yes,
funded.
it is exactly right. And his friend Tom Wilson, took us right up to where they're constructing Crazy Horse, and it's amazing to see the kind of technology that you guys have, only on a much grander scale of size, times 1,000. Something that you can see, you can see Crazy Horse from 10 miles away. And not done yet, not by any way stretch of the imagination,
Well, it
but
wasn't-
private monies.
Yeah, it wasn't like once again, it kind of goes back to that downtown here in Van Wert. I had to have some deep pockets to be able to even fund it, and
Exactly
then lots
right.
of donations and different things. But yeah, interesting. Bringing it back to Van Wert, I think he was instrumental in instituting the land bank, wasn't you?
Well, I was part of WADC at the time, and Stacey Adams was the one that said, listen, we've got a lot of derelict properties here that need to go away. Land bank was a brand new thing. And, all of the counties had access to an original investment or I should say a grant of about $500,000. And there's a lot of folks that just said, we ought to figure out how to use this, but we just don't know how, and we don't want to spend the time to do it. Stacey Adams said, I'll figure it out. And she got clear down in the weeds and figured it out and used that $500,000, mostly, predominantly, and I don't think it's an embarrassing thing. It's probably typical of other counties in some of the little villages that we had, city of Van Wert, some in Delphus, that had blighted properties that just needed to get torn down. So we used those $500,000, that $500,000, to get those hauled away, buried in place, or whatever. And for all those other counties that couldn't figure it out, there was a clawback from the state. And Stacey said, hey, can I have some of that money that's not used? Okay. So she used the initial $500,000, and then another half, and then a third half.
Wow.
And then I think finally she found $150,000. So $1.65 million she used because she could figure out the nuts and bolts of the land bank. And so we just got rid of dozens of properties.
It just wasn't doing good.
Oh, they were just
bad.
A mess, just tumble down shape, and they were a detriment to the aesthetic of your community. It was one of the best things Stacey ever did for us.
Yeah. Wow.
So excited about that, happy about that, but it shows you the value.
Now they're not doing too much with the land bank anymore.
Well, I mean, the trouble is those grant dollars aren't there. I think there are some monies that are being doled out by the state in the terms of grants for brownfield. Okay. So if you've got an old industrial site and you had some sketchy chemicals that maybe they were appropriate for the time, but for now, you've absolutely not, or had asbestos in them or something like that. Brownfield monies can be used to remediate those, or perhaps even remove them entirely and get them off of Van Wert County soil. Okay. So those monies exist. They're a little harder to come by, but it's kind of a different era now. Land banks are still functioning. They also have the option now of reconditioning those properties and putting them back on the market. So that's kind of a cool thing. We can get an old property, put a new roof on it. Maybe it just needs some windows or something like that. Somebody just really let it go to seed. But if we get quality craftsmen in there, get it fixed back up, put it on the market, and then you've got you can almost use it for maybe one of those neighborhoods that's a little bit tough shape, and you dress it up and put a great house there. And I think the term is gentrification. I want to start a new, improved community look here, and we're starting right there with that new building.
Yeah.
So it's cool concept.
Yeah, excellent. That's great. I knew that you was part of it. I guess I didn't know if you was instrumental in that, but it sounds like Stacey really was.
Yes, yeah.
So
she was
really
the heartbeat of that.
Awesome.
And it really kind of a paradigm shift. We went through kind of a hard time as 3 county commissioners because our economic development was being done in concert with Ohio State University.
Okay.
Well, Ohio State's great from an academic standpoint, but they were always the ones who taught the classes. Okay, you can sit in, you can take the classes on economic development, and we'll teach you all the academic concepts that we think you need to know about economic development, which is grossly different than someone who's been in business, who's been on the other side of the table and says, listen, these are the 3 things that I need in order to bring a business to Van Wert County. If I want to come to Van Wert County, these are the things that I need you to give me, or at least help me with, okay? Yep. And so Stacey was that first person who came from business, all right?
Yeah.
She was...
Isn't that so valuable, though?
Oh, my goodness, yes.
A
whole different pedigree is what it was, resume.
And it comes down to, in a lot of cases, let's just face it, most of the time government consumes money, right?
Yeah.
Where, us business owners.
I'm sorry.
You guys consume it, and we input it and you guys consume it, but, the business owners, we can't just spend money because we can't print money.
Yep.
We actually have to, and the local government's kind of like that too. You can only use the monies that you have.
Exactly
where,
right.
The federal government,
hey, let's just print some.
Yeah, let's print
right?
some more,
Yeah.
and then we have this inflation problem, and then they say, well, let's just create all this money, and it'll be good and be easy, and everybody will have what they need, and then we find out that, no, that's not that's not what happened. We get tons of inflation, and now everybody wants to know why everything's so expensive.
Yeah, it's like monopoly money. If you print it all out, pretty soon it has limited value or less value, certainly.
And the thing of it is if I think that the government, and this is my take on it, and my thought is if the government could stabilize the market, that would be good for everybody. But the problem is we want to just keep on printing all this money, and then we destabilize because the people on the lower end that's making X amount of dollars, they have a harder time keeping up with that inflation curve. Rather than a business owner, that what do is they have to adjust. I mean, they have to make a profit or they go out of business, right?
Yeah.
And so what do? They raise cost. That cost gets raised. People's wages aren't following necessarily that inflation level, and then it becomes difficult. And it's hard for everybody. But if we could stabilize the market, at least people could say, this is what I have, and this is what I have to spend, and I know how much that is to buy, and it doesn't change from, a $80,000 house to a $150,000 house in the course of 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
That's a really tough.
Well, and that was a
deal.
killer for us. I mean, there's a lot of folks in the state of Ohio that are actively engaging in conversation about getting rid of real estate taxes. Well, that sounds like I'm a farm guy. I'd love to ditch real estate taxes, especially with $4.40 corn and beans that they're looking at $11 out there, but we're doubting that it's ever going to get there. So there's this sense of economic malaise amongst farmers
which they've done 4 reforms at the state level on property tax.
I think there's been dozens of bills that have been introduced now.
I think maybe 4 of them got passed.
Yes, I think 4 of them, but they're not. They're not game changers. They're not world changers as far as real estate tax. Now, there's folks that are, they would like to get this on the ballot to get rid of property taxes, real estate taxes.
I've heard that initiative, yeah.
Well, every farmer I know is salivating at the notion of getting rid of real estate taxes, but understand the implications to that. Schools are funded greatly. I don't know if that's half of their value, half of their income to be able to apply their trade.
I know Lincoln View, we pay a lot.
You pay a lot.
We do.
The townships function with real estate. The county does. The schools do. We talked about Vantage. You can talk about Thomas Edison, the Maumee Valley watershed. I mean, some of these things function, and after you start thinking about, okay, how is our local EMS going to function without property taxes, and how is our schools going to, how are they going to teach kids? How are you going to educate kids without real estate? At the county level, there's somewhere around.
Would they vote in certain levies, though? I mean, how would they, I don't know. You're the guy to talk to. Do they vote in levies to say, okay, we want our money going towards this, but, did the government get crazy when they upped all the property taxes like they did for a certain amount of time?
Well, we didn't go crazy, but I mean, that was a reflection of what the value of real estate was at the time. We didn't say, okay, we're gonna greatly overvalue it so we can raise your taxes. That's just what houses and tillable land was worth at the time. And so the value of a mill, which is a dime on $1,000. I think that's a mill, okay? The value of a mill in Van Wert County in a very short period of time went from $700,000 to $1 million, $1,019,000, okay? That's 40% jump, something like that.
Yep.
And so then your school taxes went up. Well, all of your real estate taxes went up astronomically. The cool thing that we did as county commissioners is we said, okay, our value inflated from $1.8 million to $2.4 million because of real estate taxes. But we're rolling that back and keeping it 1.8 because, there's things we could do with it, but the responsible thing is to live on what we had. Now, we put a reserve in there, so if for some reason the bottom dropped out or all of a sudden we had some huge responsibility that we had to meet, we could bump that back up. But we're one of the few counties that rolled it back and said, thanks, but we'll live within our means. Yep. And it'd been nice if other entities had done the same thing.
Yep.
So, but at any rate, the long way around is it's a great notion to get rid of real estate taxes. But explain to me this, okay, if you had the opportunity to go in a voting booth and vote away all those property taxes and say, okay, I'm getting out from underneath this tremendous burden. And then you're going to turn around the next year and vote for 10% sales tax to compensate for that real estate tax. Would you vote for that? Right. Oh my goodness, no, you would.
Right.
Not on a day where your mental health was stable.
Right.
And so that's the big question is, okay, we'd love to get out from underneath it, but what's the system you put in place, a fair system that's going to generate at least a like amount of money so that we can keep government functioning?
Yeah. And I've heard both sides of the argument on it, and I see there's pros and cons to both.
Absolutely,
right?
I do too.
A lot of people will say, well, I don't pay for that milk after I drank it. Where property taxes, they never go away, right?
Sure.
And so if I only drink 1 gallon of milk, I only pay taxes on 1 gallon of milk. But once I purchase that property, shouldn't I be done with taxes?
Yep.
That's that side, right?
Yep,
absolutely. I've purchased it already. I shouldn't have to continually pay taxes on that.
And I can't argue with that. The conversation I've had with a lot of local people is, you say that you're against property taxes, and I get that, all right? Because I don't like paying them either. I just paid mine a week and a half ago in my own courthouse.
Yeah,
I
here
walked
they are.
in and I
Due,
wrote
right?
the check. Yeah. But here's I lost my train of thought. Real estate taxes. That's what happens when you talk too much.
When you talk too much about the same topic and you don't know which one you hit.
Yeah.
No. And I understand you want your fire department, your police department, and all these places to be funded, and so there's essential needs that you want to have in your community, and you're willing to say, okay, I'm part of the community, therefore I will pay this certain amount of tax. I think where people get really kind of ouchy is they see all this fraud and abuse that happened up in Minnesota, and they're like, wait a second, if we're going to allow all this waste, or we're going to ship all this money, and I understand that's a lot of the case state and federal money. It's not the local government, right?
Sure.
And so the state and federal money, it's being used so poorly, people have got a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to taxes.
Yep.
And unfortunately, it filters all the way down to the local community, and how are we spending our money, and is it being spent well? In Cleveland, maybe it's not being spent as good as you guys are doing here in Van Wert County,
well,
right?
You try to remember every day, I'm not spending my money, I'm spending someone else's money.
Correct.
And I think the point I was going to get to is, you say you don't want real estate taxes. I'm cool with that. But understand, just in the last year, in calendar year 25, the community voted for a vantage levy, and I think they voted for a library levy, and they voted for 2 Council on Aging levies, one that services Van Wert and one that takes care of Delphus. Those passed with overwhelming numbers, 70 to 80%.
Sure.
So if you really hate real estate taxes, here was your chance to make a very grand statement. Listen, I love these things. I love the library. I love Vantage. I love what it does in the way of the Council on Aging. That's what we talked about, baby boomers and what the demographic is now. But enough is enough. But nobody said that.
Right.
And so people have been presented with opportunities to say no, but they don't say no. They say yes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mixed signal.
It would be a mixed signal, unless they're just saying we're willing to support X, Y, and Z, and maybe that's what would have to happen is if they did happen to abolish them, is you're going to have a police levy, a fire levy.
Yes.
And that's what you would have to say, and people would have to say, hey, I want that service because if my house catches on fire, if I have somebody out front of my house that is causing a ruckus, we need those services. So I don't know. I assume it would probably be compartmentalized if. And it would be more difficult.
I don't know how you even. I tell people it's literally the Wild West. If you got rid of it, you would start over and say, okay, how?
But this defund the police movement would be bad at that point, right?
Oh my goodness, yes.
You want to have police as a county commissioner to know that, hey, we can maintain law and order. So I get that side too.
I've got a buddy that says, yeah, you say you want to cut taxes, but unless you tear the old down, how are you going to find something that's new and better and fair?
Yeah.
I mean, you could in your mind's eye, you could hear government say, I think we're going to appoint this to a blue ribbon commission, which is your signal right there. That's never going to do anything, all right? Yeah. And so they're going to sit down and they're going to talk endlessly like they would in the United States Senate. And they're going to come up with 10 different ideas to save all this money. And then they're going to finally, boil it down and end up with 3 things that are going to save you money. They're going to save you 5%. But only one of them is going to be implemented, and it's going to save you 1%, and after 2 years, it's going to get phased out.
Right.
You could just see government just making a mess of it, which is kind of what government does.
Yeah.
That's why they have limited powers, because more government is always bad government.
Yeah. You know what they say, when the government gets bigger, the government can drown themselves in a glass of water. I hate to say it, but sometimes we get stuck up in red tape.
Yeah, really.
But it's just an interesting concept because you want your government to run well because that's who's governing the laws and everything inside of it. And we want to have that structure as long as they don't get out of hand like all the extra fraud and abuse that we're used to seeing.
Sure.
But coming back to Van Wert County Courthouse, we had the opportunity to work in the Van Wert County Courthouse back in 2012 when you guys did that big renovation.
Sure.
Man, that was right after you pretty much took over.
I was a greenhorn at the time, And to add to the story, Chuck Steele was the judge of the Common Pleas Court. They called that the senior court. And I think Chuck knew that it was kind of his swan song. He had been a judge for a while and was looking at retirement. And so I don't know if legacy is the right term, but he wanted something to show for his tenure that, hey, this is a cool thing that I did for Van Wert County. So if you look beneath that suspended ceiling, you could see the grandeur of what had been there before. And of course, one of the very prominent things was the stained glass dome.
Yeah, and because you guys uncovered that whole section up above that. And the crazy thing that I remember is when we uncovered that dome, do you remember how bad a condition it was in?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. How old of a guy would you have been at that time?
Oh, geez, I'm crying. So that was back in 2012, so 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So,
didn't make you do.
I'd have been about 26, 25, 26 years old.
Yep.
So when I was up there working on those windows. So
the neat thing is we tore that whole framework out. That was the suspended ceiling.
Yep.
And it showed you the stained glass. But the story I tell people is, I mean, there were things that were annoying about that old stained glass dome, and occasionally a piece of glass would fall out, and it was cold.
Sure.
It was drafty. But they decided that they were going to bring in HVAC, heating and air conditioning.
Correct. So I remember those.
They ran ductwork and they bashed holes in the stained glass just to run that ductwork through there.
Yeah.
And I tell people those folks ought to still be in jail for having done that.
All they had to do is call us, and we could have taken one panel out, and they could have ran that tubing.
I know.
but a hammer was more convenient.
Yeah. Well, they were craftsmen. I don't know if they were craftsmen. No, that's the wrong term.
Yeah.
But they had to run ductwork, and that was the easiest place between A and B. It was a straight line, and so that's what they did.
Yeah.
But they also did, other parts of the courtroom where there are a rounded, kind of a faux window, all right? And there were some kind of a wooden medallion above those arched faux windows, and we don't know what was there, but we know they cut it off and they threw it away. So we looked endlessly for pictures that would show, hey, what was depicted on what kind of face was on that? What different graphic was on that? And we finally had to say, okay, we found some artists that were, they were woodcutters by trade, or maybe wood
just craftsmen.
chiseler.
Yeah, yep.
And we said, okay, we don't know what this was, but would you be willing to just take a day or a couple of days and walk around the courthouse and get a feel for what it's like and give us some kind of a depiction of what you think would be appropriate? There was some wood, like almost a braid, that was left in place from the previous, medallion that was there. So you could use that and incorporate that into something new, but we have no idea. And so you were lucky because you and your dad and your brothers and your sister, you had a framework there and you had other pieces of glass.
We did, yep.
But I still remember you guys coming in, and I think there was 24 different sections of that. I mean, if like you cut a piece of pie, it was cut in 24 pieces, and each of those 24
had 3 sets.
So you actually had 72 pieces to remove, brought them all, painstakingly removed them, brought them back here.
Yeah.
And
it
so
was incredibly dirty.
Yeah.
It was incredibly dirty. And what a lot of people don't understand about domes is, with stained glass, you have to build those stained glass windows on a curve. And you have to have a positive and you have to have a negative.
Okay.
So when you flip it, because all stained glass windows, they have to be, leaded, soldered, cemented,
right,
both sides.
Oh, okay.
Well, when you have to do that in the shop, you would have to lead that window, and then you'd have to form it to this curve, and then once you cement it, that cement has to set up, and then it holds that arc. That, I'll call it like a C. It's a more expanded C, but it has that dome, movement to it.
Mm-hmm,
and so when you flip it, you can't lay it flat on the table because you don't want it flattening back out. You want it to maintain that dome until it gets into its final resting place that has the superstructure to hold it.
Sure.
So for every panel, we had a positive and we had a negative that those windows had to lay on when they was being rebuilt. So pretty cool project. I mean, I don't remember. It seems like that dome across, what is that, 19 feet? give or take a little?
I was going to
Or is
say
it bigger than
15 to
that?
20, but
Okay.
maybe it could be 25. I've never
Okay.
done. I mean, I'm around that all the time. Whenever I give a tour, I think I mentioned to you that I show them from the courtroom side down underneath, and I always tell them, listen, you're lucky to be in this courtroom, and you're not in trouble.
Yeah, you're not in trouble.
Yeah, there's no judge here,
Yeah.
or a prosecutor because you've done something bad. But I usually take them and let them look from the bottom, and then take them upstairs.
Yeah.
And let's
Equally
see
as
it from
impressive, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's so
but
cool.
a whole different side. And of course, it's also backlit from up there.
Yeah.
But when you think that, I'm assuming that you re-welded every single joint.
Oh, everything had to be resoldered. It's brand new lead, new solder, new cement. The only thing that is maintained when you restore a stained glass window is the glass. The framework has to be rebuilt because that's what deteriorates. All stained glass windows, they have that lifespan of about 80 to 100 years, sometimes a little bit longer, depending on craftsmanship. But about that time, it just needs to be reworked. So we completed that in, I think it was around 2012, 2013,
Yeah.
somewhere in
Yep.
there. So just 100 years from now, they'll have to do it
Yeah.
again.
Your grandkids or
Yeah.
great grandkids will do that.
I won't be worrying about it.
Yeah.
You won't be worrying about it.
Yeah.
So, but
Well,
we
good.
did. We maintained it for the time that we was in charge of it, right? So it's all of our duty or our calling, I guess you would say, to maintain what we are entrusted with at that time. I look at these buildings, these 100-year-old churches and cathedrals, and we talked about a little bit over churches that you've seen in Germany and ones that we've seen in Italy and Spain and all these different historic buildings that have been around for hundreds of years.
Yes.
They still have to be maintained.
Sure.
And you think about the craftsmen that built those 100 years ago with horse and buggy and ropes and pulleys and scaffolding.
Yep.
And we do things with 50-foot, 100-foot lifts, and
Telescoping lifts.
yes.
And all different ways of picking things up.
And we use CNC equipment to be able to produce a number of things now that they had to work by hand. I mean, stained glass is still pretty painstaking. We have to do it by hand. It's the slower process, but we have digitally printed art glass that we can now substitute into places where we would have used traditional stained glass. Both are good, different benefits to each. But yeah, in that case, I mean, it's neat to handle history and know that what you produce is going to be around for the next generation.
Well, I wonder how many of those pieces, because there were obviously pieces of glass that were missing. So
Correct.
you had to do your best to match up some new to match up the old. And there was a center section that's probably, I don't know, it's 3 foot in diameter. And I call it the wagon wheel. And I remember telling your dad, Reggie, that piece is missing. And I have no idea
We had to
what it
rebuild it.
looked like. And I said, I'm going to lean on your artistic capabilities here. You're going to create it. And I'm trusting your judgment that whatever you produce is going to look cool. And it does.
And it did, yeah.
Yes, it does. And so I always point that out. Look at that. That's the artistic ability of Reggie Buehrer right there.
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
I wonder how much your mom was involved in that
Oh, she
stuff.
was, intricately. Mom and dad, they still are involved with the company and still are, a big part of it. We do have, 8 family members here, along with the rest of the employees that we have. We're growing. We need
Right.
more. We're
Makes it
in
sound
that-
like Noah's Ark almost.
I know.
You could jump that.
Yes. There's 8 of us. That's cool. I never referenced it before, but
Yeah.
no, that's right. I think there was 8. But no, they was involved, in helping build the company, and then as we've grown, we just, we have those next leaps that we have, and I have 2 boys. They're 16 and 14, and I know I have some nieces and nephews, and if we do good with what we do here, then there'll be room for everybody.
Are they? And we have that around the farm too.
Yeah.
And unless you're kind of brought along and given responsibility or given chores or something like that, is there an interest level from your kids in continuing the company?
Yeah, absolutely. There's an interest. I mean, ultimately, we want them to do what, they're young. They're still 14,
That's right.
16.
That's right.
They have a lot of opportunities and, choices to make. But we think this is a fantastic place to be. I remember when Dad was growing up, or when I was growing up and Dad was working, that was one of the big things is, we lost time because Dad and Mom, they invested so much time into the company to grow it, and that there was a time loss. Mom and Dad always made sure to make it to sporting events and
Sure.
to important events, but much like the past generation, they worked a lot of hours.
Yeah.
It was just normal.
My dad did that too, and I would have never visioned in my wildest musings that he would shut the combine off on a Friday night. But when it's time to watch his grandsons play football, that's exactly what he did. And it was cool because he valued that a great deal. Now, when he was a kid, he was a high school kid playing ball. He said, "Oh, I'm sure my dad never watched me play basketball, not even one game. So it was a waste of time." Well, it was a Depression era mentality for his dad that it was all about work, and there were chores to be done around the farm. And so
but
my
your
dad loved the
made
game, but Grandpa didn't see it as something that was valuable.
Yeah.
Two different tales.
And that's true. Then people, you do what you have to do in that era, but you don't want to miss time, because once it's gone, it's gone.
It's exactly right. Exactly right.
But it's interesting, and me and my brother talked about this in a previous podcast, but that time that we lost, we got it all back, because he built something to where we all came back into the company. You see family every day.
Sure.
That's not a story that most people can tell. Actually, most people don't want to work with their family.
And I'm trying not to look over this way.
And I can say it does happen to where you have those situations where you have to work through them. But ultimately, we've really, we've worked well together. Everybody's departmentalized. That helps.
Well, you mentioned work, and that's a big topic too. And we think that's a valuable asset that Van Wert County has, is that we have, and we're not a big county. I think we're 28,500, something like that, 28.5 to 29. We've still got some remnants of the agricultural work ethic.
Yeah.
And when you have companies that are looking for a workforce, they don't just want bodies. They want people that know how to work.
Right.
Now, part of our problem is there's just not a lot of production agriculture anymore. And that we have has been automated or been mechanized.
Well,
it all made sense because it allowed us to be so much more productive.
More efficient. Yeah.
Yes, but the time of baling hay and swinging a hay hook and throwing a 40-pound or a 50-pound bale, or forking manure, or hoeing weeds out of beans, all that stuff taught us how to work. I had about 120 sows where I raised feeder pigs. So I raised them from newborn pigs to 40 or 50 pounds. And my three sons and my daughter, they all helped. We said, "This isn't choice. I need help. You guys are going to come out and work with me."
Yeah.
And so they learned the value of hard work. They learned how to work hard.
And they're better for it.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, everything that they're doing very well because they know how to work. I sent a son off to play NFL ball because he knew how to work. And he said, I wasn't the biggest specimen or the fastest, but he said working hard was a tool I had in my toolbox.
Yeah.
And people couldn't rival me. And I would sit down and study the playbook or the new plays that were instituted for next week's game. And that was one of those things that I could do.
Yeah.
So, hard work is a great asset that it's kind of devalued. It's not appreciated, I should say, for what it is.
I'll be the first to tell pretty much anybody. I'm not the smartest and I'm not the best, but I'll outwork most people.
Yeah.
And because of that, I become successful. I don't know the last time I really had 40-hour work weeks. It's you usually close to 55, 60-hour work weeks is just where that's normal.
Yeah.
Sometimes more, sometimes a little less, but that should be, it's really not hard to accumulate that many hours in a week.
My youngest son, Luke, will say, Dad's the guy that I can count on if we're installing drainage tile and somebody needs to get down a ditch, Dad'll go down there and shovel. And he said, it's hard to outwork him. I feel good. I feel proud about that.
Yeah.
I'm an old guy with a 65-year-old body.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things, like if you stop doing it, then it becomes easy to say, well, I can't do it anymore.
Right.
As long as you keep climbing the ladder and going in a bend with a shovel and doing that stuff. And that's a little harder. And tonight, waking up tomorrow mornings, it might be a little tougher, but you just got to keep doing it.
Well, tell me what you was telling me earlier when we was walking through the plant. You was up in a lift painting something at the courthouse.
Oh yeah.
When was that?
Oh, that's. I want to say it was. I want to say it was September or October, and John Rager was installing some new windows for us.
Okay, yeah.
And John Rager's done a bunch of those, either restoring or just putting in new windows for the courthouse.
John just
And-
lives down the road from us.
Oh, does he really?
yeah,
Good.
yeah, because we live out there out on 116.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, John had a lift there that he was using to get some of the upper floors. I said, John, can we borrow that? Because our lady is in need of a makeover. And Dusty Figley found us some paint that's really an opulent, very shiny gold. I had helped him paint it last time right before we celebrated the
Bicentennial?
what would have been,
Is that right?
well, 1821 was the foundation of the county. So it had been 200 years for the county.
Right.
And we put a new coat of paint on her, but just really didn't age well. And it was supposed to be like a shiny bronze. And pretty soon it was just almost brown.
Okay.
I said, Dusty, we had to do something about this. We could get paint for not a lot of money, but still somebody's got to get in that basket and get up there and get it done. So I said, I want to do this. Is historical stuff here. Who gets to do this?
Yeah.
And so, but at the end of the day, she's made out of pretty thin, like a tin almost, a light steel.
Yep.
And so you can't sand her, you can't sandblast her. Probably wouldn't even want to power wash her without fear that, something might.
It.
Yeah. But just went up with a cloth and kind of dusted her off good and put some of this paint on. But it was neat to say that I could help do that.
Yeah.
So
everybody, your county commissioner at work, up in a lift, painting for you.
Well, the embarrassing part is
he didn't point and say do it. He actually did it.
We got up there and the guys weren't done with the lift till like almost 7 o'clock. So it was starting to get dark, and I said, Dusty, we're going to have to really use some dispatch here and get this done. So we got up, got her done. It was turning dark as we were literally shining our cell phones on her to finish up. And
you need those hard hats with the lights on them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, who knew? We didn't expect that. But then we got the lift turned around, and we started down, and we couldn't get the thing to come all the way down. We thought, oh, man, we're going to have to call the fire department just to get us down from here. How embarrassing. So we finally kept goofing around with it until it got to about 4 or 5 feet off the ground, and we could kind of climb down. And then John got it set right the next morning. But it's like, I'm glad the fire department didn't have to come and rescue us like a cat up in a tree trying to get her painted. But it was a neat thing to say they had done that. The other cool thing for Dusty Figley and I is you might remember the duress show that went through.
Yeah.
About that same time, 2012, I think.
Yes, I remember.
And it was just a big straight line wind, started in Chicago, went all the way to the East Coast. And in the process, took roofs off and shingles and a lot of stuff like that. But it blew our weather vane off the top of the courthouse.
Okay.
I said, okay, we're lucky it happened at night and nobody got killed by this dumb thing, but we need to put a weather vane back on there. So we started making phone calls. Who is it can make a weather vane for us? I mean, you guys are pretty specialty in doing stained glass. Yep. We said, okay, who can do a weather vane? We finally thought, okay, we got Elmco Engineering, John Metzger at the time. I'm not sure if they're still Elmco. I think they've sold to another company. But I called John because I knew his wife, Laura. She was our Crestview treasurer when I was a board member at Crestview. Mm-hmm. And I said, John, I heard that you do pretty good work in metal fabrication. And he said, actually, we do an exceptional job of metal fabrication. So it started out, I said, okay, I'll concede the point. I said, here's what we need. And I said, we need a new weather vane. Could you build us some? And he said, well, show me the pictures that you have of what you had. Mm-hmm. And so he fabricated. I mean, it took him just, a day or a couple of days to get it built once he knew what we wanted. But then we had to get it installed. So we brought a crane in, parked it halfway out on Main Street, half on the front porch, the front steps of the courthouse. Uh-huh. And it was time to go up. Dusty Figley says, hey, do you want to go up there with me? Because he's the maintenance guy, but he's our guy that sweeps floors. He said he's scared of heights. Can't go up. I said, I'd love to do this. Yes. So we had to put on the whole harness to make sure it was safe. And it was like a jet ride up to the top. We took that bucket and we were there in 3 seconds. And it was like being at Cedar Point, how quick we went up. But they swung us around there and then being able to step out onto the top of that very top cupola. But nobody's done this probably since the day that the courthouse was built. Yeah. Which is 1876.
Yeah, that's a cool feeling.
It is a cool feeling.
We've been up in some really big lifts and, obviously we work on some big churches and towers and we rented a 150 footer here last year, and they're just fun units to go up. And
yeah. So you're not buffaloed by heights. Then. You're not scared by heights.
Yeah, I was born 150 feet in the air.
Yeah,
that's why I tell people.
Yeah,
no, it don't bother me.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. You know, you get some of the views that nobody else gets to see of the town and the city and or wherever, maybe out on the countryside.
It's
the
really best
cool.
view in the house. I take people up clear. I call it the crow's nest, but
Yep.
And people said, "This is you get to go up here anytime you want." I said, "Anytime I want."
Anytime I want.
I've got a grandson, Ulrich. It's a Covarubius. It's my daughter's boy, and he'll say, "Grandpa, it's been a while since I've been up to the courthouse. Let's go up and look out the crow's nest." So,
yep.
you know, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
That's
so
right.
you take him up, but
Yep.
you know, all I could think of when I was up there is, and you just think this is weird. We've had a couple religious conversations already today. Is this the kind of thing when you look out on a vista like that, where Satan told Jesus, all this can be yours.
Yeah.
Cast yourself down.
Yep.
You know, weird stuff like that goes through your head.
Yeah.
Not like I'm equating myself
No.
with Jesus, but
No,
was
I'm
this
just-
the
no.
kind of
Yeah, the conversation that would have,
Yeah.
you know, that it's just grand and, you know, and look at the beauty that
Yes.
you could have next
Yep.
years. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and probably so.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of really cool things, and you realize how small. I mean, with that being said, Jesus had to know this ain't very much.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
even though he got to look at how grand and how awesome that view would have been.
Well, you talk about being out west. I mean,
my
that's part of
gosh.
the problem with Van Wert County. It's flat.
It's so
I mean,
flat,
tabletop flat.
Yep.
And so, you know, if anybody ever, you know, was suicidal and wanted to jump off a cliff, we don't have a cliff here.
Right. But you know, with those hills, you know, sometimes you feel almost claustrophobic out. No, I don't. But if you're in between two big mountains and there's this way and that way, you know, you're like, man, I can't see nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, it's a different feeling.
My middle son got drafted by the Denver Broncos. And so we got to spend a little bit more than a year out in Denver. And, you know, there are 14 and 15,000 peaks everywhere out there.
Yeah.
Well, there isn't a more stark contrast to what we have than going to Denver.
So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool
it
having a son that
was a
play
very
in the
cool
NFL
place.
and live in Denver for a little while. I mean, that's
little
awesome.
town of Parker, Colorado that he was at for a while. Short lived, but you know, it took him to some great places. Took us to some great places.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. What's so you walk through the plant here. You see some of the new products that we're doing with the Columbarium systems. I mean, what do you think? You know,
I just think it's a tale
right here
of,
in Van Wert County.
a tale of two companies that I had no idea. I mean, the great part is that you have the old, which is stained glass and refurbishing stained glass like you did for us for the county all those years ago in 2012 or 13, and this new stuff where. I mean, I wouldn't have envisioned that such a thing existed. I guess I knew practically that folks are being cremated and they have to find a place for their remains. But again, when you start talking about the demographic, not just of Van Wert County, but of the entire country, and of the wave of baby boomers that are coming to that age where they're contemplating the end of their life, experiencing the end of their life. Yeah. And so someone has to find a way to properly, with a sense of dignity, find a kind of an eternal resting place for them. You guys look like you've captured the moment.
Well, what we've seen in the cemetery industry for so long is it's been unchanged, you know, and it's similar to what the stained glass industry was. The stained glass industry was extremely unchanged. People did it the same way Dad did it, the same way Grandpa did it. And you know, that's fine. And there's always going to be a market for that. But with the cemetery industry, it's been the same. You know, it's been granite, it's been marble, everything's been etched in stone, black and white, a few different colors here and there. When you're talking about granite colors, rose colors and stuff. But what we're able to do is we're able to bring full color to the cemetery industry, which is really kind of neat because you're talking about ways that, you know, now you can bring the vibrance of somebody's life to their memory. You know, we think that that's pretty important. We think that it's pretty exciting, you know, of what we're able to produce here in Van Wert County. You know, and the other thing is, you know, we are a very hybrid contractor. You know, I think you said it as you walked through. I mean, we do glass work, we do woodworking, we do aluminum, we do stainless steel and manufacturing, and we're becoming more of a manufacturing hub than what we have been even in the past. You know, the introduction of CNC machines and
the technology you guys use is incredible.
Yeah.
It's hard not to be blown away by that all by itself.
And that's the fun part. That's what gets us up in the morning and keeps us moving forward. Is we're offering something that very few people have the opportunity to do, and we consume most of what we produce. We don't do a lot of outsourcing. We do 90%, 80 to 90% of what we produce we consume right here.
Sure.
If not more. Because we're vertically integrated. We're extremely vertically integrated. We don't have to depend on a lot of outside suppliers.
Well, it's weird because it is an odd mix of both art and technology. And you kind of think of those as being polar opposites.
And heritage too, so we're bringing in, we're still tying in a lot of the same traditional things that you would see like in a cemetery, but we're also introducing something completely new.
Well, it's great because you have a product that, by all appearances, you're never going to be able to not read who the occupant of that, what do you call your Columbarium?
Columbarium. In Columbarium,
okay.
There's,
Yeah. Okay. So, as I go back, and I'm kind of a genealogy guy, I can go back 10 generations to the Lichtensteigers and find them in Switzerland. Okay.
Really? You all the way back to Switzerland?
Yeah. They didn't start. Everybody said, that's a German name. And I talked to my genealogist. I finally hired somebody in Germany. And I said, okay, this is frustrating business. And I need to find where we came from. And she said, I know that you think you're German, but she said, your name smells Swiss to me. Smells.
It's
Yes.
probably chocolatey.
Yeah, I don't know. but she said, I'll do the research. She said, and I said that the great-great-grandfather was Caspar Lichtensteiger.
Okay.
But she took me back to a town in Germany and she said all of those immigrants had come up from Switzerland.
Yeah, clock builders.
I don't know. I think they were actually, most of them were weavers.
Oh, really?
Of fabric or whatever. Probably farm people at the most. But
sure.
If you know that period of time, they had the 30 Years' War, which was 1618 to 1648.
Okay.
That's when maybe a third of Europe killed each other over whether they were going to be Catholic or Reformed, Lutheran. All right.
Yeah.
And so after all those men were killed, large groups of people started to move around because there were openings for people that had different skill levels.
Yeah.
My group, for whatever reason, made that move from Switzerland. Lichtensteig was actually still a town in Switzerland, and made that move into Bavaria. Really? So, but at any rate,
that's cool history, though.
Looking at gravestones, so it goes back to Rudolf Lichtensteiger, born about 1600 in Switzerland. But you look at gravestones, you go to cemeteries, and you think, what value these gravestones? I can't read the writings on them anymore.
Correct. Marble was notorious for losing, the legibility,
the definition.
Yes.
And so it was great initially, and it was shiny, and you were proud of it. But over the years, then the weather and the elements and wind and whatever,
time took its course.
Yes, and then you don't know who's there.
Right.
We have some cemeteries in Van Wert County, and it's just by Ohio Revised Code, cemeteries are an obligation of township trustees. Okay. Fortunately, we don't have to deal with that. They have to deal with it. And there's some places where cemeteries are nothing more than a bunch of tipped over stones and no one knows who's there. It's the greatest tragedy of all. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the redemptions of what you're doing, is that people now should know from here for hundreds and hundreds of years, assuming we last that long, before Jesus comes,
right,
of who's there, who this person was, when they were born, when they passed, where they lived, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But that's a lost thing with so many of these great gravestones, and it's just a shame.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of history with families, going back to those and tracking it down. I mean, man, you tracking down that far, that's impressive, isn't as
I just
well.
said
So,
I'm not one of those guys that listens to know very well.
Yeah.
And the first person I talked to was someone out in Salt Lake City. The Mormons are big on genealogies. And so they had somebody, there's a PhD guy that did some research, and he said, I think there's some mistakes in the writings, et cetera. I got to get a better answer than this. And I speak a little German because I've been over there and have met the family.
So you ever go to the Oktoberfest over there in Munich?
Oh my gosh. It's the biggest party I have ever seen in my whole life. I think it's, last I knew the numbers were 6.5 million people in 16 days.
Yeah.
And they're all drinking beer and riding on really aggressive fair rides. So how they're not getting sick, I don't know, but that's...
Is it warm? Is it warm beer over there?
Oh, goodness, no.
Oh,
No,
they made it cold now.
I've heard that story a million
Okay,
times.
I
And
didn't
I
know.
don't know why you drink. I can barely drink it when it's cold, but I've got enough German heritage in me that I've found a way to, master that. Yeah. It just seemed like the right thing to do. I think my sons taught me, but that's another conversation. But just to go over there and to say that you're Bavarian, that's what they do. And I think it was a German celebration that was started to celebrate the marriage of a young prince and his bride that were eventually going to ascend to the throne in Bavaria. Okay. And that's how it started, and it's going strong to this day. And they all wear the fancy get-up, the Trachten, they call it.
Okay.
The fancy the lederhosen and all those things that go along with it. It's just an amazing thing to see and to experience. Yeah, it's a cool thing.
Yeah, real neat.
So you've been over?
I've not been to Germany yet, but I keep wanting to go because I want to drive on the Autobahn.
Oh, that's another great thing. Yeah.
That seems like so much fun.
Yeah. 132 miles an hour was as fast as I drove on the Autobahn.
Yeah.
It's amazing that they have these.
Because here they restrict us. Dad, they're restricting us at the government level. They won't let us drive fast enough on 30. Let us drive. But.
Well, I mean, they built the Autobahn with the idea that goods and people were going to turn. Now, if you know Adolf Hitler, because it was one of his innovations, you have to wonder if he was secretly thinking, this isn't how I'm going to move people and goods. This is how I'm going to move soldiers and weapons. Because this was kind of a first of its kind. And really, when you read, there are signs, road signs, right outside of Washington, D.C., called the Eisenhower Interstate System. Well, all he did was bring home the Autobahn from Germany that he'd seen over there when he was commander-in-chief.
Okay.
And instituted. It's the interstate system.
The interstates, right?
And it's just wild that there's these long, protracted stretches of road that have no speed limit. Now, they have a suggested speed limit of 78 kilometers an hour, which is maybe, I think it's like 78 as a max, 78 miles an hour max, okay? But, you don't see a state patrol. You don't see a police car out on the Autobahn because if you go out there, you know that you want to drive fast. I want to get from A to B as fast as I can go. And so if you're over in that pass, it's not left-hand driving like in England. That's just a nightmare over there. And I've done it before, but it's just really weird. I've done it in Jamaica too. But it's regular, you stay to the right. A car coming at you is on his right, so you pass each other like that. But in 2 lanes, which is a lot of their Autobahn, you get out and you pass. Trucks are mandated. Semi-trucks are mandated to stay in the right-hand lane. So they can't be out there blocking traffic. But you're out there passing. I'm tooling along 120 mile an hour, and I see someone in my rear view mirror flashing his lights. That means I'm coming really fast.
Really fast.
And so you move over, and you're doing 120, and here goes a black Mercedes by you at probably 150, I'm guessing. And it's just like nothing you've ever experienced. Now, when they have wrecks over on the Autobahn, they are glorious. Okay, someone is usually dead when they have a wreck on the Autobahn. Yeah. Now, when you're in town driving or you're coming into town, coming past the school, hey, you'll see cops there, and they will throw the book at you because when you're around town and people, you're expected to drive safe.
Yep.
And there is no tolerance for consuming alcoholic beverages and being behind the wheel. You dare shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And so you better be sober as a judge. But if you're on the Autobahn, it's fast. Yeah. And you got to be prepared and pay attention because people are driving
get
very aggressively.
Get in and get out.
Yeah.
So
yeah, a lot of fun.
Cool. No.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've done a pretty good job.
We've been around the world, haven't we?
We've covered the United States, local, world.
Yeah.
I think we did good today.
Yeah. It was a delight being in your plant and seeing the expansion and the adaptation that you've made in the incorporation of technology. Yeah. I think your dad said that we had people drive by here and say, I've been by this place 1,000 times, but I never knew what you did inside.
Yeah, until they come inside, there's a lot of people that don't have any idea of all the technology and things that we're using right here at Window Creations and Crystal Creek.
It's incredible.
So,
I'm impressed.
Yep.
Now you need to come on my show. I
do.
told you I have a Thursday morning show that we record, the Commissioner's Corner, And there's probably somebody I talk to every week that said, I listen to your show every week. That's how I know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel like we have this cult following, but maybe I'm exaggerating.
Well,
I'm ready to print T-shirts or something,
we should do it. Yeah. I'd be happy to come on.
That'd be great.
Yeah. I'll have to get it on my schedule and make it in there one of these days. No,
understand it's Chris Roberts. Chris Roberts was Whoa. He was one of those big voices over on WOWO. He's got some more years to him. I know Chris really well because he's married to my first cousin, Debbie Stripe, who has the health food store in Van Wert. That's Deb Ford.
Yes. Okay.
And so, but it's kind of an impromptu show, and I tell people, bring what you want to say on a 3x5 index card.
Yeah. It's
and
got to be
maybe
organic.
You'll get to half of it because it goes where Chris goes. He'll latch onto something that you said, and then we'll go clear over here. We'll go clear over here, and then it's this guy's talking about what's going on and what's.
It's the best way to really podcast it or talk or discuss, different things because people want to know about you and they want to know about what's going on. Scripted stuff never works really super good, does it?
And it's also it's why a guy like Joe Rogan is so successful. Politicians are able to kind of market themselves in 5 and 10 second sound bites. But if you're on a guy's show for 2 hours, you're going to eventually find out what's really underneath the slick veneer. Yeah. You're going to find out what this guy is and what he isn't.
Right.
Is he just
2.5 hours? You're going to know him.
Exactly.
You're going to know him.
You got all the ins and outs of this guy, and you're going to find out some deep, dark secrets and some things that aren't so flattering. But you're going to know the real guy.
Yep.
And so
maybe
that's a cool part.
Maybe Joe Rogan will catch on our podcast because we're mentioning him, and he'll plug us, and then.
It'll be to the stars.
It'll be to the stars, right?
Yep.
So, Joe, this is for you. We're waiting on you. We're waiting on your phone call.
Waiting for the call.
You're waiting on your phone call. So we really appreciate you coming on today, Thad.
Good to be with you.
Yep. So,
thanks so much.
Yeah. Well, that's this week's episode of The Creative Niche with Window Creations, Crystal Creek Glass, and our Van Wert County Commissioner, Thad Lichtensteiger. So if you liked what you heard here, be sure to check us out. Like, subscribe, comment, do everything that you know to do to help us, and we appreciate that. And if you want to learn a little bit more about Thad or get in contact with him, what's the best way?
203-1835. 419-203-18. I'm on Facebook, so ding me there, whatever. Half of Van Wert County has my phone number, so I'm not baffled by that. That's
okay.
Good.
So awesome. So if you need to get in, Thad's always an open book. He's always going to tell you, what he thinks is best. And so we really appreciate that. We appreciate you coming here, talking to us. It's been really good.
Fun time. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, guys. See ya.